Mean and median are considered measures of center. The mean is the average value in a data set. And to find the mean, you simply add all the data values together, then you divide by the amount of values in the data set. Median is the middle value in the data set. And to find it, you write all the numbers in order from lowest to highest, and you identify the value that falls exactly in the middle. If you have two values that fall exactly in the middle, then you find the average of those two middle values. Let's look at an example. Here we have a data set and we will calculate the mean and median. Luckily, this data set is already in order from lowest to highest. To calculate the mean, as I mentioned before, I'm going to first add all these values together. Then I'll divide by the amount of data values. If you count, I have 10 data values here. When I added up all 10 of these values, I ended up with a sum of 204. I divide 204 by 10, representing the 10 data values. I end up with 20.4, which is the mean. Remember, the median is located exactly in the middle of the data set. In this case, I have two values located exactly in the middle. Those two values are 18 and 21. Because notice, to the left of 18, there's 4 numbers, and to the right of 21, there's also 4 numbers. So to find the median, I have to calculate the average of 18 and 21. When I add 18 plus 21, I get 39. I divide by 2 to get 19.5, which is considered the median. Let's look at another example. In this case, I have 9 data values. So to find the mean, I'll first add up all 9 of these values. I end up with 512. When I divide by 9, I get 56.9, which is my mean. To determine the median, I look for the value located directly in the center. In this case, there's only one number in the center, that's 78. Because notice, to the left of 78, there's 4 values, and to the right of 78, there's also 4 values. So that is my median. Quartiles and percentiles are considered measures of location. The reason quartiles have this name is because they divide ordered data into 4 parts. To understand this further, let's think about quarters. We know it takes 4 quarters to make $1 because each quarter is worth 25 cents. In the same way, when quartiles divide a data set into 4 parts, each part represents 25% of the data set. So the first quartile, or Q1, means you've reached the first 25% of all data values. Quartile 2, or Q2, means that you've reached the middle of the data set. You have reached the first 50% of data values. And Q3, representing the third quartile, means you've reached 75% of the data set. Because of this, Q1 is also called the 25th percentile. Q2, also known as the median, is also called the 50th percentile. And Q3 is also called the 75th percentile. When we want to find measures of location, the first thing we have to do is divide the data set exactly in half. We kind of did that before when locating the median. Remember, in our first example, we had 2 numbers that were located exactly in the middle. So to determine the median, or Q2, we found the average of those 2 numbers, which was 19.5. To determine Q1, you have to look at the lower half of the data set and find the number that falls exactly in the middle. So when looking at the lower half of this data set, I'm seeing 5 numbers. In the middle of those 5 numbers is 17, so that is Q1. To determine Q3, you look at the upper half of the data set and you find the number that's located exactly in the middle of the upper half. Again, I'm seeing 5 numbers here. In the middle of those 5 numbers is 26, so that is Q3. Let's try this for the second example. Again, we have to first divide the data set exactly in half, and we determined before that there was a single number located exactly in the middle of the data set. That number was 78. That was our median, also known as Q2. To determine Q1, again, I look at the lower half of the data set. I'm seeing, once I created this division, that there's 4 numbers in the lower half of the data set. Because of this, there's 2 numbers that fall in the middle of the lower half. So to find Q1, I have to calculate the average of those 2 numbers. And the average is 25. When looking at the upper half of the data set, again, I'm seeing 4 numbers in the upper half. That means there's 2 numbers that fall exactly in the middle of the upper half. So to calculate Q3, I have to calculate the average of these 2 numbers, which is 82. Finally, let's talk about measures of spread. Range and interquartile range are considered measures of spread. The range is the difference between the largest and smallest values in a data set. And the range basically measures how spread out all of the data is. The interquartile range is the difference between the third quartile, Q3, and the first quartile, Q1. And the IQR measures how spread out the middle half of the data is. Something important to keep in mind about these calculations is a higher range or IQR means there is more variation in the data, meaning the data is more spread out. These were the examples that we've been working with, and you might recall these were the quartiles we calculated for both examples. We are now going to use this information to calculate the range and IQR. Remember, to calculate the range, I subtract the highest value minus the lowest value. In this case, that's 27 and 12, and my range is 15. The IQR is Q3 minus Q1. In this case, it's 26 minus 17, so my IQR is 9. For the second example, my highest value is 96, my lowest value is 17, so my range is 79. In the second example, Q3 is 82, Q1 is 25, so the IQR is 57. Notice the range and IQR for the second example is much larger than the range and IQR for the first example, which makes sense because there's much more variation in the second example, meaning the numbers are much more different than each other. They are much more spread out. Notice 96 is significantly different than 17 in the second example. Compared to the first example, in which the highest is 27, yet the lowest is 12. These two values are not that far apart from each other.